In those days, the Crest was in service to the Shade, protectors of Heartvale. We know where the Vidala are hiding. Winestone has returned from a meeting with a woman named Sydney Caliver. She provided us with their exact location. They have taken over a temple to Interves in Mudside, and they are protected by gods and followers. But that will not be enough to divert our wrath. Chirurgeon Phaser and I will be disposing of Destrian Vidala's body, while the others hunt the rest of his cursed family. Iron Gull is marshalling the troops, ready to move out. From the first time we crossed paths, these Vidala have dogged our steps, and we theirs. At last we have them within our sights. Tonight we find these cultists of Vargosh. Tonight we strike the final blow. Tonight we conclude our contract. Welcome back for another episode of Errant Adventures. As always, I'm your game master and solo player, Steve Morrison. On this week's episode, the Crest's goal is in sight as they prepare to launch the final assault on the Vidala family and their assembled cultists. Find out what happens on episode 54, First Strike. Last time, the Shade Hadrius Dicaro took our heroes to meet with Sydney Caliver, a crime lord, perhaps the preeminent crime lord in the city of Davenar, at an inn called the Broken Axe, where she provided them information on the Vidala location, how many guards they have, what the array of their forces are, and she provided them this with the caveat that Ben and his fellows would steal something for her. Ben convinced her to give them the information now so they could move on it, and she agreed with the understanding that they had signed a contract to perform this action for her in the future. Meanwhile, Gillen, a Crest soldier, received some false intelligence which he passed on to Iron Gull that pointed to a location in the ATR's chambers, a district in Davenar, which seemed to be a location for a Vidala safe house. Iron Gull and some Crest soldiers went out there and were ambushed by Vidala guards, but they were not surprised by this ambush, and though 4 Crest were killed, Iron Gull and the others managed to take out the rest of those Vidala guards. However, when he returned, he confronted Destrian Vidala, who had given up no information to Saga during her interrogation. But with the knowledge that Ben and the others retrieved from Sydney Caliver, Iron Gull decided that he didn't need Destrian Vidala anymore, so he drove a blade through the man's heart. Iron Gull draws forth his sword as Destrian Vidala slumps forward. He wipes the blood away and then turns to look at Saga. He says, "Sorry about that. I've been wanting to do that for a while now. We know where they are. I'm going to take our soldiers and we're going to finish this. Will you be able to dispose of the body?" Saga nods and says, "I will fetch Eskor and he will help me." "Good luck, Iron Gull. Finish the work that we've come to do." Iron Gull begins gathering the Crest soldiers. As he does so, I've got a couple questions for the fate chart before we set up our next scene. The first question that comes to mind is, we already knew that Cleopha was planning to attack the inn to rescue her brother. Does that attack go off before the Crest leave the Shivering Swan and make their way towards Mudside? I think it is unlikely that it goes off before they leave, because I think that while the Crest are going to leave in the middle of the night, I don't think that she would attack until the middle of the night. So I'm going to say it's unlikely that it goes off. We're going to keep our chaos factor of 6. Here we go. 99, which is an exceptional no, and those doubles are well above our chaos factor, so it's not going to trigger a random event. So with an exceptional no, the attack from Cleopha is definitely not going to go off before they arrive, which means, I think because it's an exceptional no, I think that she has not left yet when they arrive. Whatever creature she summoned to attack with is going to be present, and I think is going to play a part in this battle to come. With that in mind, I guess the other question is, does Lephalia return before this strike? And I think it's very likely that she does. Again, chaos factor of 6. 44 is a yes, and that is also a double, and that will initiate a random event. So yes, she returns before the attack, but let's go ahead and determine our event focus here. 81. Ambiguous event. Well, that's great. Okay. Action is 30, which is going to be break, and the subject is 15. Break the innocent. And this is an ambiguous event. Does Cleopha, and maybe more importantly, does the mother of the Vidala feel the death of Destrian? Are they aware of this death? I think it's 50-50. 73 is a no. Okay, so it doesn't have anything to do with his death specifically, but I think they know that the Crest are coming. And because of that, I think the mother of the Vidala is at this very moment enacting a ritual that is driving mad the people who are around this temple. And it is corrupting them, which is the primary influence of Vargosh. And so I think what's happening is that these people are sort of losing their minds, and they're almost becoming like zombies. Their minds are becoming foggy and clouded, and they are just roaming the streets, and it's this really bizarre, maybe like evolution of this boil and like weeping sore sickness that is going on. And so that's, I think, going to create some chaos in the streets. Lephalia returns to the Shivering Swan a little after dusk to find the Crest soldiers gearing up and preparing to move out. And I think she approaches Iron Gull and says, "What is happening? Have you found them at last?" Iron Gull nods and says, "Aye, we have. They are in Mudside, and we found their exact location. The temple. We're gonna move out tonight and strike. Finish this once and for all." She says, "Excellent. Then let us prepare." At this, I think she's going to go to Arid and say, "Arid, I believe it is time for you to enact this ritual that you have been experimenting with. Protect our fellows. Keep them safe from this corruption." Arid offers a half bow and says, "As you wish, Lieutenant." And he steps forward and is going to say, "My friends, as we go out to do our duty, I have prepared this ritual for you." And he begins to chant. And we're going to go ahead and use this move, power, horrible power. You have achieved arcane mastery over something. When you command what you have mastered, roll plus arcane. On a hit, hold 1. Spend your hold to bend what you master to your will. So I'm going to roll 2d6 plus 2 for Arid's arcane. I'm going to go ahead and mark an advancement point here, and let's see what happens. 5 on the dice plus 2 is a 7. So we barely got there. So we got a hold plus 1. But 7 to 9, the MC will also pick a consequence from the following list. Control is weak. The effect is less or not exactly what you desired. Your control is erratic. There may be unexpected consequences. Your control is exhausting. You take a harm. I think it's weak. And I think it's weak not because Arid is incapable of enacting this mystical barrier around the spirits of his compatriots, but just there are 20 Crest here that he is trying to extend this influence over. And so I think it is going to have an effect. It is going to help to reduce some of this corrupting influence of the cult of Vargosh, but it's not necessarily going to completely remove that from the equation going forward. So we'll just have to remember that as they deal with these cultists, any consequences that might revolve around this corrupting influence, they're still going to have to deal with. When Arid has finished with the ritual, Iron Gull steps forward, and they're all crammed into this small sort of like suite in this inn. And Iron Gull says, "All right, everybody, you know why we're here. We were sent to find these cultists of Vargosh, hunt them down, and put an end to them. We've discovered their location. We've already taken out one of them. Let's go find the others, finish the work. Then we can all drink at ease tomorrow." There's a rumble of approval in the assembled soldiers. Iron Gull says, "You all know your squads. We know that we're walking into a considerable force. They have guards that are protecting them, but there is always the potential that their followers and supplicants are going to be a problem as well. Do your best to spare any innocent lives, but do not forget our mission. Our mission is to strike down the Vidala. We do it here. We do it now. We put this all behind us. Let's go." And they are going to begin to move out. Now we know that Mudside is separated, is blocked off, is guarded. But I think it is very likely that they have acquired boats or some way to cross the canal in secret. I'm going to ask the Fate Chart this one last question here. Have they gathered boats to cross the canal into Mudside? 60 is a yes. Yes, they have. So let's go ahead and set our next scene, which is Assault the Vidala Safe House. And we're going to raise the chaos factor up to 7. And I'm going to roll my d10 and see how this scene plays out. A 9, which is above the chaos factor, so it plays out as expected. The Crest filter out of the Shivering Swan in groups of 2 and 3 and 4. The night is deep and dark, and as they move through the streets of Everall's Purse, there are not many out. Only criminals, really, hurry through the streets of Davenar at this hour. Criminals and mercenaries. set on a mission. No one bothers them as they make their way to a section of canal across from Mudside. And they load into a small collection of boats, push off and cross the small canal to the other side. The boats creak ever so gently as the water laps against the sides. And when they reach the other side, they climb out, fabric whispering in the night. They begin making their way, and as recommended by the company surgeon, Escorfeza, they have all dipped rags in scented oil and wrapped them over their faces, their noses, and their mouths to keep out the stench of decay in this place. They creep through the darkened streets, and they can hear the moaning and groaning of people in pain. They make their way down the street. And unlike in the purse, which they just left behind, there are more people in the streets here, wandering around. They are agitated, but they also don't seem to come close, almost as though they are repelled. Is it that ritual that Arid chanted over them? Is it the smell of the oil and scents in the cloths that they carry? Whatever it is, they make their way through the street unmolested until they reach a section of street where they see a small temple. It's a temple to a god of time, of the passage of time. And there are reliefs on the outside that show the changing of the seasons. Those reliefs now show fall. And it's hard to see in the darkness, but at one time, these plaques, these reliefs would have been burnished with oranges and yellows and golds to represent the changing of the season from summer to fall. Now they're dull, and there are parts of the metal that have seemingly rusted and eaten away. And the Crest draw closer to this place. There's movement on the outside of this temple. A figure on patrol. Ben creeps forward, directed by Iron Gull, and he draws back his crossbow and he places a bolt there. He creeps forward just a little more, and then he lines up a shot. And he strikes. We roll face duress. 2d6 plus steady, which is plus 3. 7 on the dice plus 3 is a 10. You have achieved what you set out to do. The bolt arcs out and thunks into the guard, taking him in the throat. He gurgles and collapses, and there's a light clattering of metal as he hits the ground. But other than that, there is silence. The Crest inch forward, and Lephalia begins to chant under her breath and focus on the outside of this temple, ready to crack it open so that the Crest soldiers can enter. Before she does that, however, we have to ask the fate chart a question, because the Vidala have occult countermeasures. And I'm going to ask the fate chart, do these occult countermeasures go off in the face of these magically imbued soldiers who are about to unleash this assault on their safe house? I think it's basically a sure thing. This is what these countermeasures are here to prevent. Chaos factor of 7, a near sure thing. 50 even is a yes. Yes, the Vidala are warned. Lephalia, with her chanting beneath her breath, raises her hands and reaches out with her talent, and she feels this shimmer of magical protection around this warehouse. And as she focuses on driving a tiny point of power through this veil and then taking hold of it and tearing it open so that the Crest soldiers can charge forward, she does so. She tears it apart. But in so doing, this horrid screech echoes through the streets, and the Vidala are alerted. There is a cry from inside, and we shift away for a brief moment as in the bowels of this temple, the mother of the Vidala is sitting before that pool, and she opens her eyes. She looks over into this black, inky, dark pool, and she says, "Dread Beetle, come to our aid. Grant us the strength to strike down these mercenaries, that we may continue your work." As the Crest make their way forward, this cry comes out from inside the temple, and guards who had been prepared for this assault stream out into the streets, and suddenly the Crest are facing off against these Vidala guards. This cry of battle goes up as the Crest charge forward against these guards. I have created a number of clocks to represent these things. We've got these guards, which are going to represent all of the Vidala guards and their followers and like anyone who is willing to stand and fight and defend them. That is a 12-part clock. Each harm will deal 1 point to those. And then we have Cleofa and her creature. Cleofa is a 4-part clock. The creature is a 6-part clock. And then the mother of the Vidala is also a 6-part clock. So as we begin, these guards come streaming out and engage in battle against these Crest soldiers. Arid, Ben, Orchid are clustered together as a squad, and they draw their weapons. Arid begins to chant and focus, and Orchid is, of course, in the lead. So they are going to stride forward with their axe Bone Eater and begin singing a Pheramorchian death chant as Bone Eater swings through the air. It is time to engage in combat. Orchid swinging their axe +3 on this 2d6. That is an 8 plus 3 is an 11 on this initial engage in combat roll. So on a 10 plus, can choose multiple different options here. Choose to add +1 harm, take -1 harm, +2 harm, but take an additional +1 harm to yourself. Deal -1 harm, but take an additional -2 harm to themselves. And then we get some additional options as a 10 plus. So Orchid is chanting a Pheramorchian death song and charging in. It feels appropriate at this moment to say that they are battling aggressively. So this is inflicting +2 harm, but taking an additional harm to themselves. So Bone Eater is automatically a 3 harm weapon, and inflicting +2 more harm is going to be 5 total harm, which is a tremendous amount of harm inflicted on these guards. But I think the standard weapon is 2 harm, and maybe we should ask the fate chart. Do they have weapons that are going to be more potent than standard weapons? Are they going to be 3 harm weapons? I think it's impossible, but that's still a 15% chance. 51 is a no. So they are just standard weapons that they're fighting against, which means Orchid would take 0 harm because they have an armor of 2, but because they attacked aggressively, they're going to take 1 harm because their armor only soaks up 2 of the 3. So Orchid charging forward, singing this song, axe swinging in the night air as I think the sky sort of lights up with sorcery as Arid and Lephalia begin throwing magic across at these guards. Orchid swings their axe around, and 3 of these guards who are charging forward take blows and are immediately felled. I think then the additional here is you can pick to stymie the opponent. They must change their behavior somehow. Impressive or dominant, gain the attention or respect of those present, or achieve a goal. You may change the situation, grab something from your opponent, push them somewhere, block their entrance or exit, etc. So the goal here is to destroy the Vidala. Specifically, these cultists of Vargosh, Cleofa and her mother. So I don't think that they actually want to continue fighting these guards out here. They want to get inside. They want to find Cleofa and her mother, and they want to fell them. So I think that is the achieve a goal here, is Orchid with Bone Eater clears a path into the temple, and the other soldiers of the Crest outside, Iron Gull in the lead, are fighting off these guards as they pour out of this temple. And Ben, Arid, and Orchid are able to slip past into the temple itself and make their way through. So, question is, are they going to then encounter Cleofa? Is she down in the bowels of this place with her mother, or is she up here with this creature that she sent to fight? I think she's in the bowels with her mother. So I think that is basically a sure thing. Roll to 100, which is an exceptional no. She is not in the basement. She is here. She has sworn an oath to her mother because maybe her mother is trying to enact one more dark ritual before the mercenaries close in. And so Cleofa, they have this moment where she says, "My daughter, give me time to enact this ritual that we might be victorious." Cleofa says, "Yes, mother, I will give you time. I have prepared a special treat for our visitors." And we cut to the worship area of this temple. And inside the temple, it is rotting. And the stonework is falling away. It is the oppressive influence of this corruption inside here. And I think we have to ask the question, is this corruption getting to Ben, Arid, and Orchid? Now, because of the protections that they've received, I'm going to say it's very unlikely. But I'm only going to say it's very unlikely because Arid was not able to fully protect everyone. And so there's still a possibility here that some of that corruption leaks through and they have to fight it off themselves. So I think it is very unlikely that the corruption is breaking through their defenses. 36 is a yes. It is breaking through. So they run into this area, and I think that they feel this wave of corruption and decay, and it's like it's not even necessarily physical corruption and decay, but just this overwhelming sense of the world falling apart around them. And I think that they're all going to have to face duress to continue to act in this moment. So we're gonna roll with Ben first. This is +3. 6 on the dice +3 is a 9. So that is achieve your goal, but comes at a price. Achieve your goal, but only partially. Cannot achieve your goal, but can do something similar instead. So I think Ben is able to push past this, but I think it is going to reduce his effectiveness for the next volley, if you will. So he'll take a -1 on this next action. Arid is going to roll +1 for his steady. 7 + 1 is an 8. I think he is trying to focus on the magic and extend his talent, especially around his friends here and now. And so I think he is not going to be able to act at all in this, as he is trying to fend off this corruption. And then Orchid is going to have a steady of 1 as well. 6 on the dice +1 is a 7. I'm going to say they also can act, but are going to take a penalty in this action. The 3 of them charge into the sanctum of this temple, and Cleofa Vidala is standing there in these black and green clothes, and beside her is a creature that she summoned. What does this creature look like? Glad you asked. Let's go over to monsters and animals in Maze Rats, and let's roll ourselves up a little critter here. Let's roll on monster features. See what this creature has. 6 and 2. Talons. Perfect. What else does it have? 4 and 6. Shaggy hair. Monster traits. 2 and 6. Eyeless. 1 and 4. Cannibal. And then let's see what kind of abilities it has. 1 and 2. Acid blood. That doesn't sound fun. I think that this thing looks almost like a werewolf or something like that, where it's bipedal, it's standing up on 2 legs, it is covered in this shaggy fur, and where its eyes should be, there are just sockets, just empty sockets, and its teeth are dripping with saliva, and these long claws are clacking together as it just sort of sways next to Cleofa. And as she sees them, she says, "Kill them, my pet." And it leaps forward. So here's the thing. I think that Orchid is going to interpose themselves between this creature and the others. So Orchid is going to attempt to engage in combat with this creature, but they're going to take a -1. So this is going to be rolling fierce +2 on this. They're just a little bit more sluggish. Here comes the strike. 5 on the dice +2 is a 7. So I think that, are they going to battle aggressively again? I think so. I think Orchid is just seeing blood and red, and they swing out with their axe. That is going to fill 5 of the 6 segments on this clock. So I think they interpose themselves and just swing Bone Eater in this overhand swing, and it catches this creature in the chest and embeds the axe deep in its chest. And this spray of blood comes gushing out. Unfortunately, this thing has acidic blood, and so that splashes over Orchid's forearms and neck, and this acid is sizzling on their skin. And I think this thing definitely deals more damage than just a standard harm. So I'm going to say it also deals 3 harm, and that's a +1 harm for the battle aggressively, so that's going to deal 4 harm. Orchid is going to absorb 2 of those pieces of harm and then take 2. So they are up to 3 out of 5 harm. Arid is unable to do anything at this moment. He is wrestling with trying to keep this corruption from overpowering their defenses. But Ben is able to do something here. I think that inside this sanctuary, they're too close for him to pull up his crossbow and get a clean shot. So I think he throws it to the side. He draws out his blade, and I think he charges forward towards Cleofa. He's going to attempt to stab her through the heart and keep her from casting any spells on any of them. This is going to be plus fierce for Ben as he engages in combat, but he also is at a -1 for this, so he's only got +1 to this roll. 9 on the dice, +1 is a 10, so he is successful. Now here's the thing. His weapon deals 2 harm. If he battles aggressively here, he can deal +2 harm, but he's going to take harm to himself. I think he's got to do that. His goal here is to strike her down, and he sees his chance. So he charges forward with his sword, and he drives it forward at her. She is in the midst of chanting, and she unleashes some vile spell on him. And maybe we should roll up what that spell is, as this blade strikes through and pierces her heart, filling her clock completely. And Ben is going to take, I think, 3 harm. He has an armor of 1, so he's going to absorb 2 of that harm to himself. And then let's see what kind of spell she unleashed on him. 6 and 6, ethereal effect and an ethereal element. So the effect is 1 and 6, communicating. And ethereal element. Communicating 1 and 2, fire. Communicating with fire. I think what that means is he charges forward. He rears back with his blade. She is looking him in the face, snarling as she's chanting, and the braziers that are hanging on the wall that are emitting this like sickly green flame lash out towards him and consume him in a gout of fire as his blade strikes through. There's a brief moment where Cleofa gasps as the blade pierces her heart, and then she stares down at the blade in her chest for a brief moment, looks back up, and her eyes turn from this look of anger and hatred to this look of absolute terror as she realizes that her life is fading away. And as Ben is patting at the flames that have ignited on his clothing, pulls the blade free, she emits one last soft cry and then collapses to the ground. Does this banish the creature, or is the creature here to stay until it's destroyed? Does this banish the creature? I think that's impossible. I don't think that's how this works. Ask the fate chart. 79 is a no. No, it does not banish the creature, but I think the creature is very upset over its mistress being slain. Here's the question. Is it going to go after Ben? I think it might go after Ben since he's the one that struck her down. Let's roll a d6. 1 to 3, it will continue fighting Orchid, who is right in front of it with their axe buried in its chest. 4 to 6, it turns around and goes after Ben. 2. All right, so it continues fighting Orchid. That's probably the best option for everybody except maybe Orchid. Here's the question. They've performed this volley. I don't think that the corruption in here goes away. So I think maybe they have to try and maintain this. They're facing their duress again. So we'll do a steady of 1 here. 4 on the dice, plus 1 is a 5. So Orchid is, I think, unable to fight back here, which means I think that they're going to take 1 harm because the creature has 3 harm as its damage. Orchid has an armor of 2, so they can absorb some, but the claws rake across Orchid's armor, and Orchid has their head in their hands trying to fight off the press of this corruption all around them. Can Arid do anything? Rolling plus steady. This is plus 1 for him as well. We got a 5 and a 3. That's an 8. Plus 1 is a 9. So once again, he can act, but at some sort of penalty or disadvantage. So I think he can do some magic here. He can try to Arcane Malice and strike at this creature with his Arcane. So he's going to do that, but at a -1. So this will be plus 1 on this roll. 4 on the dice, plus 1 is a 5. That is a miss. I think Arid turns and focuses on that fire, but he still has those burn scars from the ruin that he was in. And seeing this, I think he is struggling to focus, and he doesn't quite summon the will to draw up the power to unleash on this creature. And that creature turns, and I think it slashes out at him. He's going to have to try and get out of the way in order to not take harm. And I think that's going to be a face duress, as Arid, with 1 steady, rolls 10 on the dice, plus 1. He ducks and dives out of the way to avoid these brutal claws cutting him open. Is Ben able to act? This is going to be plus 3 for his steady. 8 on the dice, plus 3 is an 11, which means he gets a complete success. He resists the corrupting influence, throws off the shackles of this confusion and slowness. His body is moving the way that he wants it to as he has this blade in his hand, and he sees the creature, and he is going to try and strike at it. Plus fierce, which is plus 2. 3 on the dice, plus 2 is a 5, which means he is unable to inflict harm and is going to take 3 harm from the creature. He has an armor of 1. It means he's going to take 2 harm here. That takes him up to 5 harm. I think at this point, things can go very, very poorly. So, there are a couple options here. I can choose for Ben to take a debility to avoid the harm. And that would be either Shaken, which would give him -1 steady, Weakened, which would give him -1 fierce, Tentative, which would give him -1 wily, or Clouded, which would give him -1 sly. If you take that, you mark it off, and then make the stat change as appropriate, and then incorporate that into the character. can also roll on the taking harm, and this is a way to reduce the amount of harm you take, but there's a more narrative option. I think Ben is going to mark a debility to reflect this assault. And so we're not going to take that 2 harm. And I'm going to choose to take the weakened debility, which is going to reduce his fierce from 2 down to 1. And I think what this represents is that he takes a brutal slash across his armor. It gouges open his armor. It lifts him off the ground and throws him against a pillar nearby. And I think Ben hits and like something breaks his ribs, and he's weakened. He's not going to be able to swing as effectively, and he is on the ground coughing blood as the creature roars in fury. Can Orchid act? So here's the thing. I've got this +1 hold for Arid as part of the horrible power, where he can spend that hold to bend what you master to your will. And I think that could represent him forcing clear the consequences of the corruption in this room. He's been saving it for facing off against the mother of the Vidala herself, but this might be the time. But I think Orchid has a chance here to try and clear their own mind with a steady roll. Here we go. 5 on the dice, +1 is a 6, which is not going to do it. They would again be unable to act. So Arid is going to spend that hold to purge the corruption from them in this place. And Orchid shakes their head, stands. I'm hoping that my dice have not gone too cold for this one last attack. As Orchid stands up, pulls Bone Eater free, and swings again. +3. 11 on the dice, +3 is a 14. That will do it. So I think in this case, Orchid has sort of regained their consciousness, and they're going to parry their blows. So they're going to take -1 harm. So Orchid deals 3 harm, but takes only 2 harm, which is absorbed by their armor. So they strike out at this nasty creature that's trying to chomp down on them, and then the axe head sinks into the thing's neck, and it goes down on one knee, and that blood is sort of like spurting up and out, and it's burning across Orchid's breastplate. And the creature tries to claw up again, and Orchid catches its hand and is holding it steady as they drive the axe blade through the rest of its neck and decapitate the creature. It falls to the ground, dead. Arid turns and looks at Ben and says, "Ben, my friend, are you all right?" Ben, sort of coughing once again, gets up to his feet and says, "Oh, well, I've certainly been better, I can say." And he looks over at the dead form of Cleofa Vidala, and he says, "That's 2 now. 1 left. My friends, shall we finish this?" And together the 3 of them descend into the bowels beneath this temple to face the last Vidala of this cult of Vargosh. Thanks for listening to Errant Adventures, and thank you so much to Syrinscape for the lovely ambient sounds and music throughout the episode. If you enjoyed the show, please tell anyone and everyone in your life about it. And if you want to support the show directly, leave me a review or buy me a coffee at coffee.com/errantadventures. That's ko-fi.com/errantadventures. If you want to interact with me, my handle on Instagram and Twitter is @errantsolopod, or you can email me at errantsolopod@gmail.com. I also post short fiction and campaign-related materials on my website, errantadventurespod.com. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.